So, a new feature film has been released in the last few weeks back in the United Kingdom, your whereabouts, and it will make its way over here to United States streaming services in the coming weeks. And that is the film called Giant about Prince Naseem Hamed, the once lineal, multiple time featherweight champion of the world, one of the great punchers in featherweight history, and really pound for pound. You saw the film, so I definitely want to get your synopsis and your thoughts on it. My opening impressions of the trailer was that this is, as I have it here in my notes, another formulaic fluff autobiography, which has become the norm in autobiographies. Once upon a time, what made these autobiographical films so good was the way they showed the good, the bad, and the ugly. And oftentimes the ugly was the most magnetic part of the film. And what I'm getting at is a film like Mommy Dearest about Joan Crawford, which Joan Crawford was known as one of the foremost starlets of her era. But it showed what an abusive mother she was to the children she adopted, what a mentally not well person she was, and how she had this, narcissistic need to be beloved by the public, though she often treated those around her not so well. Another movie would have been Aviator about Howard Hughes. And despite it showing what a genius he was and the stands he took against his competitors and some of the things he did for the US government in World War II, and also being a pioneer in American cinema, it also showed him being butt naked, wrapped alone in his own movie theater, pissing in multiple water bottles and milk bottles, and being a womanizer and all these kinds of things played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Goodfellas, Casino are actually, to an extent, autobiographical films of Anthony Spilotro, Henry Hill, etc. And while there is definitely those depictions are a bit romanticized, but they also show, again, the really ugly underbelly and the reality of those characters' lives. And to sum up those string of four-star kind of autobiographical representations in movies, also Behind the Candelabra, showing Liberace as a man who would groom young men, played by Michael Douglas, and the young man he was grooming was Matt Damon. A brilliant film with brilliant performances, but it showed the ugly. It didn't just glorify Liberace, but to sum those up, Raging Bull. If you're asking me to hold Giant to some kind of standard that's not there, Raging Bull is right there, maybe as it's in the argument for the greatest boxing film ever made in American cinema. And that film showed Jake LaMotta beating his wife, being a crazy asshole for a lot of the movies. It showed you that the same things that made him the Raging Bull in the ring destroyed him and took away from him outside of the ring. So I'm not asking for a standard that hasn't existed, but what I call these last 10 or 15 years of autobiographical films, whether it's the NWA movie, whether it's the Queen movie, whether it's the James Brown movie, or so on and so forth, they are formulaic fluff and oftentimes glorified music videos. And they trick the audience into thinking they've seen a good movie when really they just play a highlight reel of concerts, or in this case, fights. And the critiques are often PG-13, punches are pulled. And I just don't find them as enticing. And so when I saw the trailer playing that EMF song from the 90s, oh, you're unbelievable, and just a glorified music video of Prince Naseem knocking people out, I pretty much expected it. And people go, well, how could you know that without seeing the film? Well, certain beats an action movie or a superhero movie is going to hit. Certain beats a horror movie is going to hit. And so I'm saying these autobiographies are becoming kind of predictable. But Raheem, am I just being an asshole? You actually saw the movie. What'd you think?
Raging Bull, certainly in the conversation for greatest fight movie ever, has a similarity with Giant, which is I see Raging Bull, while it is contextually a boxing movie, in reality, it's a movie about relationships. It's about LaMotta's relationship with his wife. It's about LaMotta's relationship with his brother, and ultimately how that informs his relationship with himself, with the iconic scene of him sitting there in the mirror, right? Giant, while not done nearly as well, is also a movie about relationships. It's about the relationship between Naseem and Ingle. It's about the relationship between Naseem and his family. It's also about the relationship between England at the time and Pakistanis, right? All that's in the mix. But primarily, I think it's a trainer-fighter relationship. And it's one that has its history in boxing that we've seen many iterations of, but it's unique in that a fighter being taken from the first time you walk in the gym off the street all the way to world championship stardom and global stardom at that. That is an uncommon story because it's an uncommon journey for a fighter. Like as many champions as you can think of off the top of your head, the global superstars, the one who stand the test of time in the memory of the public, are few and far between, even as many as you can remember. Considering how many years we've been in this sport and how many people have tried it, there are very few that reach that pinnacle. Prince Naseem is one of them. Having been taken from a child 11, not even 11, I think when we came off the street, even younger than that, they depict the trainer, Ingle, Brendan Ingle, welcoming him into the gym, encouraging him, seeing something special in him from the beginning, this happening in the environment of abject racism in the country at the time. And then shepherding along this Pakistani kid who has a unique talent that only Ingle can see initially and feeds and trains and nurtures and grows into a successful fighter, then a champion, then a global superstar, and what he believes he deserves for that investment. And also feeding a fighter's ego and sense of invincibility and sense of singularity in his ability also feeds a tremendous ego and maybe an outsized self-worth. Well, those two are ultimately going to come to a conclude a collision if in the middle of all that there isn't a mutual respect from one for what the other is contributing. And so that's really the crux of this movie. And honestly, I remember Naseem's career is kind of early days for me in boxing. And yes, he's certainly a star and made his impression globally and in the United States, but not nearly to the extent that he made it in the United Kingdom. And so I didn't know the backstory with him and the trainer and all the conflict that Ingle wrote a book about him. I didn't realize that their relationship was that deep or that was such big news here in the UK and was such a big part of his narrative. Prince Naseem for me was really just all about the boxing story. I wasn't read in on the backstory. So once I seen the movie and then started to delve deep into people who were around at the time, their takes on what that relationship was like, who was right, who was wrong. And then, of course, Brendan Ingle is not here to defend himself or represent his side of the story, but Naseem is, and he's been all over every show you can think of talking about it. So that's what this movie represents for me. Uh, so uh, let's talk a bit for the context because this isn't a current fighter. Some people watching, a lot of people may not really remember his career, certainly not firsthand. I'll leave it to you to kind of set the stage for who Naseem was in the game.
Yeah, I wish I would have started at the top by mentioning to the audience we're going to use this movie also as a jump off point to have a retrospective on Prince Naseem Hamed and the career he had and what he meant to the sport overall and all those kinds of things. When you mention the time he came about, and at a time where it sounds like you're explaining when Pakistani Brits or people from the Middle East were becoming part of the larger whole of the United Kingdom and Britain. It's important to note that he's been incredibly influential on fighters of Middle Eastern descent that have followed him, like Amir Khan, like Hamza Shiraz, and now Adam Azim. These are all guys who I'm pretty sure each of them on the record have talked about, the way Prince Naseem Hamed inspired them, right? And to start about Prince Naseem, the fighter himself, he was an incredible talent with incredible gifts. Now we're going to get to the flaws later on in the video that were ultimately exposed by a great fighter like Marco Antonio Barrera, but he had incredible punching power, dexterity. He was dynamic. He could switch hit. He had knockouts as a southpaw and as an orthodox fighter. He was a counter puncher. He had tremendous foot speed and would hit fighters from angles where they couldn't see the punches coming. And again, I'll get into this a little bit later about how he missed the boat with the true four kings of featherweight, which went on to become Morales, Barrera, Marquez, and Pacquiao. But he was I always call those guys the four kings of featherweight, likening their runs in those divisions to Leonard, Hearns, Hagler, and Duran. But he was the king when it comes to the box office at featherweight. And even in researching him today and yesterday, because we're from the United States, I didn't realize just how much of a box office success he really was. Yes, he sold out the MGM Grand on pay-per-view fighting Barrera. That fight did 300,000 pay-per-view buys, which for context, guys, 99.9% of fighters would kill to do those kind of numbers now. And he did sell out Madison Square Garden and made it on Conan O'Brien before knocking out Kevin Kelly in what was either the fight of the year of 1997 or came just short of it, was a contender for fight of the year. And
right in the middle of the conflict with his trainer. We'll have to revisit that as well. Like, that was a crucial moment in his relationship and career, that he was keeping Brendan Ingle on after he had written this tell-all book, Ingle did, about Naseem. It was like blowing everybody's mind that with this public conflict, this seeming betrayal of privacy and trust from Ingle having written a tell-all about his current fighter, that then Naseem would continue to have Ingle in his corner and be trained day to day by his sons, Dominic. And yeah, so that was, I think, also kind of telling. But I don't mean to jump in, but I do want to deal with that piece of the journey that you've already laid out, because the question that springs to mind immediately when you start laying out his accolades and what he was able to accomplish and his style, well, okay, the business side of it, well, that's down to Frank Warren and Queensberry. That is the promoter making the most out of a fighter with his kind of talent and appeal, and being able to promote a fighter like in a time where, again, it cannot be overlooked how much racism there was in the country around Pakistanis, which is why these fighters who come up behind him, I think, have so much respect and look at him like an idol, because that was their example that you can live in this country, get that kind of respect, and have that level of success, even if you're Pakistani or Middle Eastern. And so the talent that he displayed, well, let Prince Naseem tell it. Most of the time, he was saying that, well, he trained himself, that he had the ability to do all this on his own, and that his trainer in that environment was just, formulaic, and he was going outside of what was being told in the corner, and he was making decisions in the ring on the fly and doing it all himself. And then at other times, he'll give credit to Ingle and talk about how much input he had and nurturing him and bringing him along. So it depends on what day you catch Naseem, which side of the story you get. But in general, how much credit does a trainer deserve, regardless of what the fighter thinks he's doing or not doing? If he's with you the whole time and you're displaying this kind of ability and this unique talent and you're successful in it, by definition, how much does the trainer get credit for that or deserve for your success?
No, it's a great point to be made, because he seemingly fought off instincts and gifts and talent almost alone. He certainly wasn't fundamentally sound we talk about certain fighters that have that habit, that are gifted of pulling out with their chin up. He puts them to shame. He was the master of pulling out with your chin up. It was way up in the air, but still was the best featherweight from like 95 up until he lost to Barrera. When you talk about Ingle writing a book about him in the midst of their coach-fighter relationship and then it resuming thereafter, I'm thinking of Phil Jackson and Kobe Bryant. Phil, in The Last Dance in 2004, wrote scathingly about Kobe Bryant, really didn't pull any punches about him. And that was part of why a lot of people around the situation said in so many ways, so many words, Kobe let Lakers management know, hey, him and Shaq are out of here. If this is my team and this is my franchise going forward, Kobe then wound up resuming the relationship and they wound up winning 2 titles together later on. But I'm reminded of that. But for Hamed to share part of the blame too, he had Emmanuel Stewart towards the end in his corner, and Stewart, who would talk about his superlative gifts, because Stewart told the full truth about him, how frustrating it was to deal with him, how much he didn't listen, but also him and George Foreman, who would both commentate some of his fights or work with him in Stewart's case on HBO, would always emphasize, no, he has profound gifts, that you can't teach in the ring, of power, of reflexes, of how dynamic and creative he could be and unorthodox he was. But Emmanuel was doing everything he could to prepare him for Barrera, and Hamed just wouldn't listen. So and Emmanuel's track record speaks for himself. I mean, look what he did with Holyfield in the Bo rematch, the way he turned the tables because Holyfield listened to him. I think Hamed, you make a great point that how much credit can Ingle get when this guy seemingly didn't fight with a lot of boxing fundamentals and became the featherweight champion for 5 or 6 years anyways, because the kind of ridiculous gifts God bestowed upon him. But at the same time, he was a hard-headed, arrogant man who if he didn't listen to Emmanuel Stewart, perhaps he didn't listen to Brendan Ingle too at several times, and was just fighting off instincts and talent. And by the way, when I mention, because a lot of the narrative in the United States is he fought a lot of, we're talking in relative terms, championship level, legendary terms. He fought a lot of meh competition, and then he ran into a real elite fighter against Barrera and got decisively beaten. But he really wasn't just a front runner though, Raheem. He took kind of a hellacious beating from Barrera, the kind of clean shots he got hit with. He picked himself up off the canvas multiple times in his career to win by knockout, which shows a level of grit that he did possess. And also, I think he took a good shot, even though he got dropped in multiple fights. He's off balance half the time. His chin is way up in the air. But if he couldn't take a good shot, he wouldn't have been able to take so many flush on the button, right on the money shots, and then get up and still win by knockout.
Let me address the Kobe Bryant, Phil Jackson analogy. It's not going to hit quite the same here in the UK. There's no NBA here. However, Kobe is such a global superstar and such an iconic figure in sports that whether you follow basketball or not, you know who Kobe Bryant is and you have an image of him. Well, when Phil Jackson wrote that book, Kobe Bryant's image was the best in the game. You're comparing him with Jordan. We don't know who's going to ultimately be the best ever, Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. Kobe's an endorsement treasure chest. He is seen as a great guy and all this stuff. There's some rumbling about him being a ball hog, but he's the best. Who wasn't a ball hog when they were the best, with the exception of Magic Johnson? And so what Brendan Ingle said about writing that book when being criticized about exposing his fighters' personal life and shortcomings was that, well, now you'll all see who this guy really is, as opposed to the hero that everybody thinks he is, and maybe this will get him back on the right track. Basically, he wrote the book to humble him, thinking that this image that he is being rewarded for publicly, not reflecting who he is personally, is what's creating this personality that is incredibly difficult to train and coach, and also potentially self-destructive as your ego can be as a young man if you really think that your shit don't stink and nothing applies to you rules-wise and you can just do anything. I think Phil Jackson was doing the same thing, like trying to humble his star while holding on to his position as trainer, or in this case, coach, and being able to make him a better man, because at that point they weren't able to get through to the star, and was hoping that changing their public image would reflect on that star some self-awareness, and having their dirty laundry aired to some extent would take the shine off the apple and maybe stop them being rewarded for being, in your words, assholes. Not that you're calling them assholes, but you understand. This
Kobe
is
called himself an asshole. He was quoted as that. And I love
right.
Kobe.
So even in the way that athletes have to grow up in front of the public, some athletes are such marvel successes and able to, with their personality, affability, charm, sometimes good looks, able to minimize their character flaws, and the media becomes sycophantic with the image of this superstar and starts to help paper over the cracks in their character and create this image to sell newspapers or make clicks these days or whatever it is. And the athlete benefits from that in a public image, but might be being hurt from that privately because there's no accountability. And that makes it an incredibly hard person to coach or to correct. And I think in both cases, the coach and the trainer took an extreme tactic to try to right the ship as they saw it. That's one very generous way to look at what Phil Jackson did and what Brennan Ingle did. The other way, and it takes a lot less time to say it, is you just straight up betrayed your superstar. You aired their dirty laundry. They trusted you knowing that everybody's private life is private. Nobody wants their worst days aired. And based on your ego, you put out negative stuff about them to the public that you knew would eat them up to make your own point, to make yourself not be the villain of the story. That's a dirty trick.
Brilliant stuff as always, Raheem. And I would say this is can't it be both? I mean, are we not adults with intellectual depth who can't compartmentalize that these two things may be true at the same time? Funny you talked about ego and betrayal. Kobe felt betrayed, and Phil Jackson wrote in the book, I have an enormous ego. I kind of
Hmm.
have to have one to stare at eye level with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. He accounted for that himself. When you make this brilliant point that helps illustrate what I'm getting at earlier, why I don't like the way these autobiographical films went. As you said, the media then becomes psychophantic, right? And they treat it in that way. They paper over the ugly and the truths. And what I'm so Martin Scorsese made Raging Bull, right? One reason he is not a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and a lot of these new movies is he goes, they're theme park rides. They don't really truthfully examine the human condition. And that is what the art of great films is really supposed to do. It may not be school. Well, I'm not, but lack of a better way of saying it, you're supposed to learn something. You're supposed to actually take something away from the film besides, wow, that was badass, and wow, he was badass. And to your point about how there's a self-correcting nature by the truth being depicted to its subject, the person that's being written about or filmed about, it's a self-correcting nature for society, and that is the bone I'm picking. Case in point, when Ike Turner saw, late by the end of the Tina Turner movies, like, I don't give up that narcotics now. By the truth getting out about him, he had to self-correct a little bit. Jake LaMotta in the movie, remember, part of why De Niro won an Oscar for it is he becomes obese. He blows up in weight like Hamed is right now. And I'm not body shaming or anything right now. I'm making a deeper point. When when he saw Raging Bull, eventually he lost weight. Eventually he apologized to Vicky LaMotta. Eventually he went on the record and was like, I was an asshole. And mellowed out a little bit to where people that met him in the last few decades of his life said Jake changed a little bit. He became a better person. And I don't know if he could have done that if Raging Bull was just the highlight reel music video of him knocking out a bunch of fighters and just becoming middleweight champion without all the other stuff that accompanied it. And ultimately, the audience glorifies you anyway. They take the good with the bad, and it just makes for a better film.
A little bit of Hollywood inside baseball that can explain the difference in one biopic from the other. The ones you like, the ones that are more explorative of the dark side of our superstars and icons, tend to be the ones that those icons and superstars are not involved in. The ones that do have this puff piece kind of shine to the star and paper over some of the negativity tend to be, and nothing is absolute, but this is the vast majority involving getting the rights of the story from the star themselves. The star has written an autobiography, or the star has the rights to their own story, and nobody else has written a book that sufficiently tells it or knows enough to make a movie out of. So you've got to get the rights from the actual person who then has some control over the story that you're telling, by definition. In this case, the star of the film, being Prince Naseem, had nothing to do with it. And the book that they based the movie on wasn't the book written by Brendan Ingle. And so I think they did enough to kind of show both sides of the argument, but I just saw this movie more as two sides of an argument.
Hmm.
And in the well, I mean, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Take a pause just for a second. Give me 20 seconds. The final scene of the movie is them hashing out their differences in a back and forth. That was a little bit corny, but also never happened. Okay, everybody can turn back on.
That's why it is corny.
Right.
Right.
And so that part of the movie never having happened is something that Nassim speaks about, and he says he wished that what happened in that part of the movie had actually happened. And so the writers of the screenplay took some great liberties, and I forgive them for that because on the one hand, Hollywood wants a certain type of movie, and on the other hand, I think they were playing to the relationship thing, and the part that I talked about kind of needed to be fleshed out. You kind of needed it packaged that way to get the point at the end. And so the argument kind of is what I want to have. I do want to think about what is rightfully what. Now, another element of this film, and again, yes, it's a spoiler alert, not as big as the last one. However, this is something that is being discussed, uh, and it is being asserted by Prince Nassim as to how it happened. I don't think Brendan Ingle was in denial about it. I think he also admitted that this is what happened. But Prince Nassim said that basically Ingle made a deal with him at the age of 11. And Nassim was 11 years old when Ingle said, when you make 40 million, I get 10. Well, even an 11-year-old can probably do that math. That's 25%, right? And so does a fighter have to pay a trainer 25% when he starts making tens of millions of dollars or multi-millions of dollars, or does the trainer's fee get reduced? And typically, you're not paying a trainer 25% when you're making millions and millions of dollars as a superstar. But also, typically, that trainer hasn't been with you since you were 10 years old. Typically, that trainer hasn't brought you all the way through from a child never having walked into the gym to making these multi-million dollar purses. By the time you're making those purses, usually a guy has changed a trainer once or even twice, or if they haven't, all along the way, the trainer's making like 10%. And, the trainer also hasn't been a father figure necessarily. Like that fighter might have, had his own family structure and all this stuff. That element of it, I do have some some grace for. Like 25% sounds like a lot, and it is. However, the plight of a boxing trainer is probably the worst deal in all of boxing. Of all the jobs you can have, with the exception of journalists, in boxing, being a trainer is the worst. You have no job security. Your investment comes early and it's deep. It's completely aspirational as to what you think you see in a fighter. And the minute that what you see in the fighter actually becomes evident based on your work and investment, everybody comes to that fighter with a better deal than you want to give them and take over for you without paying anything to you. It's like taking over somebody's house without having to buy it. Just saying, I'm moving in. What a great house you've built here. But if the tenant is happy for me to own it now instead of you, then you're out. Forget about all the nails you've driven through this wood. This is a understandable reason why, even talking to an 11-year-old, and Prince Naseem said it wasn't just one conversation. He kept that drum beat going and drilled it into my head that this was the deal all along. And so Prince Naseem says, well, that means this guy was all about money. However, I think this guy also had tasted betrayal and the investment that he had put into other fighters being ripped away from him and there being no loyalty from fighter to coach. Once that 10% all of a sudden becomes millions of dollars and a new trainer is willing to take 5%, but hasn't built the house. And so it's easy because there's no investment. That 10% or that 25%, I'd say 15 of the 25 is you paying him back for you from 10 to 20, 22 years old when you weren't making no money, when there was no guarantees, but at any point you could have walked out of that gym, when you maybe weren't going to be the superstar that he believed you could be, when he stuck with you through all the arrogance and all the combat and the growing boy and all the conflict that's just going to happen as you become a man and rebel and maybe don't take his advice and still go in there winning because you have a home in the gym. And to cut this a little shorter, the proof is after the book was written and all the conflict was exposed, Naseem stayed in that system. It wasn't Ingle on the pads anymore. Personally, he was supervising, but it was his sons that were still running the system because no matter what Naseem said, it was the system he was comfortable with. And it was the way he was happy to prepare for fights. And that, to me, speaks to him acknowledging that there was a value he was getting out of that, even in the worst times. And also, it speaks to his grace and being like, even though you betrayed me and I'm upset and disappointed and hurt, I'm still going to pay you and still going to stay here and give you another shot to make this relationship work. So I don't know that there's any bad guy, good guy, black and white in this story, which is what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, that's what makes a good movie too, is it's not these simple and cut good guy, bad guy, like it's a freaking superhero movie again. This real life is more nuanced than that. And well, two things can be true at once. Like I actually know from personal experience, coming into some money and people when you were young, grown-ups, adults, friends of mine whose parents said, hey, remember you said if you ever get this much money, you'll buy us a house. And it's like that really played out in my life, in real life, and actually happened. Actually bought someone a house and didn't feel too good about it after I did it. But so you could look at that as kind of grooming. You know, you're grooming an 11-year-old. But at the other side, when I mentioned about Phil Jackson and Kobe, Phil Jackson's got a guaranteed contract that's making more than half the team. So the financial security of a trainer is nowhere near the same. And so is that a little manipulative or even grooming, to use a more contemporary term? Yes. But is he actually entitled to a lot of that? Yeah, probably, because of all the tournaments he may have even paid out of pocket for. When the kid was making $0 and 0 cents his first dozens, if not hundreds of fights as an amateur, and all the time spent away from his family and all those kinds of things. And then at the same time, if you're Prince Naseem Hamed, it's, hey man, Roger Mayweather and Floyd Mayweather Sr. are Floyd Jr.'s blood, and they're not making anywhere near probably 25% of his check. No way in hell. So these differing viewpoints both have validity to it, and that's actual real life. It's not so cut and dry. And back to what's funny is the parallels again with Raging Bull, the ones that are there and are not there. You said that discussion between the two of them didn't actually happen. There's after Jake goes, you fuck my wife, Joey, you fuck my wife, and he beats the hell out of him and then beats his wife in front of his nephews and nieces. And that's what I mean by Give us the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if autobiographies will show that kind of stuff then. And I'll tie it up with a valid point in a second. Um, in the film, Joe Pesci and De Niro, they have this little talk when De Niro's done performing at his burnt out nightclub in the Bronx, and they see each other, and De Niro hugs them and kisses them. That never happened. After they had their falling out in real life, they didn't speak anymore. Jack was his real name, Jack LaMotta and Jake LaMotta. So yeah, there's that too, that parallel. But and then I want to take it back to the boxing of Naseem Hamed and his career, and take us back there. But to close on the points I'm making about how autobiographies are made now versus how they were made when they were better. I asked you before the movie, I go, did they show the car accident? Because Naseem Hamed in 2005, after he had his career over and blew up in weight, he almost killed somebody in a car crash and had a number of offenses with his driving that were overlooked because increasingly as time has went on, well, always, we treat celebrity with a level of standards that the rest of us don't get to adhere to. They're above the law a lot of times. And he was supposed to be sentenced to 15 months. He did 16 weeks. And and without even seeing the movie, just knowing how these autobiographies are made, watching the trailer, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't even show that in the movie, like they show LaMotta beating his wife, like they show LaMotta accosting an underage girl in his nightclub that gets him thrown in a jail cell. Did they show it, Raheem?
No, no.
Okay,
And
so I'm not just tripping.
you're not. And I would say they probably didn't show it because, and this is not a justification for brushing over something that significant in a person's life, but because they're telling a story about a relationship and probably knowing that Naseem, well, after the fact, they're going to rope him into promoting this story. They don't want to sidetrack the film with this crisis of conscience and have a discussion like we're discussing now, the relationship, which is what I think the movie's about. And if you put that in there and do justice to it, well, that becomes a real side narrative that is likely to somewhat derail that feel-good moment that never happened. Well, you know what they do? They put in scenes that never happened, and they take out scenes that did happen. So at the end of the movie, you can have a feeling that you want to feel and talk to people about, and those people want to feel that feeling, so they go to the movie, right? That is a part and parcel of Hollywood standard. The reason that you get something like what you got out of Raging Bull is because the director really, is not at the time making the one of the most classic movies ever. They don't know that. The studio doesn't know that. They're giving this director some leeway on what is more of a niche story, which is an independent kind of approach to a movie. It's black and white, for Christ's sake. Like, I bet Scorsese knew what he was doing, but he was tricking the studio into not knowing what he was doing, and they give him some room to breathe because this ain't a big movie to them until it is, right? And so, yeah, that draws us in. That shows the dirty side, the dark side. That feeds us into making it a cult classic. But when you're trying to make a movie that you can sell, that you can take the family to, and is gonna check all the boxes of the emotional triggers you want push, which tend to be the happy ones, not the sad ones, then you play it safe. You want to get your movie sold, you want to get your movie distributed, and you want people to watch it. So you're not taking those kind of chances. And I must make an exception to this Marvel thing, which I'm glad you re-mentioned because they reminded me. Logan is a hell of a Marvel movie with layers and depth and real issues. And I'm not in the Marvel universe. I'm not following the Avengers and all that shit. But Logan breaks that mold. That's a hell of a good movie. And Black Panther, the first one, deals with some real social issues and is dope. And yes, it has its good guy and bad guy, but even the good guy and bad guy in that movie, you can pick sides. You could think of the bad guy as a good guy and the good guy as somewhat the bad guy even. Black Panther and Logan, I think you got to make exceptions in that Marvel universe. That needed to be said.
Yeah, I'm not saying people can't enjoy these blockbuster films. I just more so not, Marty's not God, nobody is. I just more so agree with him overall in his comments about that than I
Yeah, of
disagree. I
course.
agree more than I disagree. I like the first Spider-Man movie. I saw Avengers Endgame. I enjoyed it. I went to go see it with Samantha's little cousins back in San Bernardino. We had a good time. It was a good popcorn flick. Like I'm not saying we can't have nice things and enjoy them. But a critique that is very valid about Hollywood right now and films in general is they're not as good as they used to be. I don't. You're not getting The
They're
Godfather
not taking
2.
chances like they used to
Yeah,
take.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
not making room for that indie film. They're not letting that director take all those, risks and potentially torpedo the box office. And now you barely even go to the movies anymore. Everything's a streamer. Like I went to the actual movie to see this because I wanted to be prepared for this conversation. But it's very rare now that you go actually sit in a theater and watch anything. So maybe that reality turns it back in our favor in that because you can just put things on your streamer and the movie now becomes kind of an unusual or rare thing to do that they'll let more artistic things, more masterpieces. You're going to get maybe just both ends of the spectrum. The super blockbuster summer movie that is just completely nonsense filler, but will give you the wow factor. And then nothing in between. And then like the really artistic director's cut expression of some kind of deep thing that may or may not hit. But if it don't hit, it's out of the theater inside of 2, 3 weeks and nobody cares. So you pop it on the streamer and you can still get your money. I suspect that might be what's coming down the pike in cinema.
Yeah, I mean, Scarface flopped, so that tells you good movies don't always do great, right? So I know you love Scarface.
Right.
So, but back to Hamed, the career he had, and I said, he missed the boat on the four kings of featherweight: Marquez, Pacquiao,
Mm.
Barrera, and Morales. But Pacquiao never fought on a pay-per-view until he was a 130 pounder, until he was a junior lightweight, super featherweight. I was I was kind of staggered. I was really impressed, not staggered. I was really impressed by the box office numbers and revenue that Prince Naseem Hamed generated. I mean, this dude fought on pay-per-views that sold 700,000 pay-per-views, 400 plus thousand pay-per-views, fights that grossed 50 to 75 million dollars in the 1990s, and then sold it out here in America at the two biggest venues in boxing, MSG and then MGM Grand. And he was the king of featherweight when it comes to that. And I don't think those four fighters, he is a domino effect by him fighting Barrera in America in front of Barrera's crowd, a Mexican American crowd in Vegas. He and putting him over inadvertently, those guys got a chance to reach heights that eventually led to Pacquiao setting records with Mayweather, because Pacquiao can't get there without Morales, Marquez, and Barrera, but Barrera can't get there without the Hamed fight. There wasn't a true, because Morales and Barrera, their first fight was HBO After Dark. Their second fight by 2002 sold out the MGM and was a pay-per-view. And yeah, it was because their first fight was so celebrated and is one of the greatest fights of all time, but it was because Barrera became the A side in beating Hamed. And nobody was really crowned after Chavez truly until Barrera beat Hamed. And that is one of the most celebrated victories in Mexican boxing history. It's the one that made Barrera a made man. Now, Hamed, for all his give, yeah, go ahead.
Well, the telling factor also for me with Prince Naseem Ahmed is that as many times as he got up off the canvas to win by knockout, the fight that he lost seemed to knock him out of a career. He only had one fight after the Barrera fight, and it wasn't a Barrera rematch.
Mm-hmm.
I question what that says about his ability and legacy because we've all seen the Invincible Fighter run. And for me, the icons of the sport, the ones who really make that lasting impression, do so when they are able to come back from the shattering of their invincibility. When they're able to either make an adjustment and figure out how to fight differently because somebody solved the puzzle, or they're able to use that same technique, use that same ability, go back to the drawing board, be better at what they do best. And even though people know how to beat them, they can't do it because they can't actually execute what they already know works. That is also a marvel and a testament to your training. And then it's more than God-gifted ability. That is where that different level comes in. When the thing that you've been skating on fails you, then what do you do? I don't know because at that point, Ingle's obviously no longer in the corner. He's with Stewart, who says he's not listening. So where do you go there? If you're a trainable fighter, or if you're a guy who doesn't actually need training and you can do it all yourself, I would say the moment of truth is after you actually lose, after somebody solves the puzzle. Because, like you said, he wasn't orthodox. He wasn't using the kind of techniques that fighters that have the kind of success that he had typically are rooted in. And so for me, Naseem was a magician, a puzzle, incredibly difficult to figure out. And he was able to skate on that for as long as he did. But once somebody figures that out, then it's like, all right, where's the substance at now? How do you reconstitute? Are you able to pull that trick again, even though that they now know what the trick is? Can you still pull it off, or do you have new tricks? And that question was answered with a resounding no. Now, maybe there's other factors. Maybe it's the hand injury. Maybe it's the age. Maybe he lost Pat. Who knows what else you can offer to say why you don't continue to pursue a career. But for me, to be as brash and arrogant as he is, and to be as willing to take all the credit for all his success and claim, the kind of greatness that he wants to claim in his style, that was the time to prove that you really can do it, no matter who's in your corner or not. And I don't think he ever proved that.
No, he did not. And he is a deserved Hall of Famer. Again, one of the most unique fighters, incredible talent, one of the great punchers, right? And so again, a deserved Hall of Famer. But to your point, once he got found out, how did he respond? He didn't respond. Barrera got found out by Junior Jones in 1997. And what happened? That face first, which he was excellent at. I mean, I don't want to sell Barrera short. He's one of the all-time greats, but he got found out and he rediscovered himself. He became, his jab got much better. His footwork got better. He became harder to hit. And that's why he dominated Prince Naseem Hamed. Then he got found out by Pacquiao and found a way to rediscover himself. Morales got found out by him and then beat Pacquiao. And Marquez got found out. He was too patient of a counterpuncher. So he stepped it up a little bit and then eventually knocked Pacquiao out too. Pacquiao got found out. He was a one-handed fighter, double jab, straight left hand. That got found out by Marquez and Morales. He came back and beat both of them. So that's why they're the four kings of featherweight. And he was the king of the box office, but not as great as they were. And he was the same age as Barrera. He was a year younger than Marquez. Morales and Pacquiao were a little bit younger. But if he was really that dude like he says he was, he would have mixed and matched with all of them. And the minute he ran into one of them, it was basically over. One more fight against Manuel Calvo. And what happened was, and he's made a ton of excuses since then, like you've said. And some of them could definitely be true. Killing himself to make weight, the hand injuries, all kinds of things. I'm not saying there can't be any validity to that. Again, two things could be true at once. Okay, that's true, but it's still an excuse to a large degree too. But heading into that fight with Barrera, first of all, Barrera, he ran into someone who was in the same ballpark of his talent. He's more talented than Barrera, but Barrera, his talent is slept on. He had very fast hands. He had very good punching power. So if Hamed's natural gifts are here and Barrera's right here, Barrera's overall technical acumen, fundamentals, and skills overall is here and his is here. And so this trumped this. Okay, that's what happened in that fight. But
Give us your favorite quote, Sean,
which one?
about hard work and talent.
Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? And Barrera had a lot of fucking talent in his own right. So did Morales. Pacquiao is his equal in talent, and it sucks they never fought. That would have been an incredible fight at 126. He was more talented than Marquez too. But yeah, Pacquiao eventually shored up his deficiencies and became one of the greatest fighters of all time. That's the difference between a Pacquiao and a Hamed. But to get back to Hamed, oh man, my mistake there for a minute. I'll edit this. Oh yeah, so he he runs into that, and I think I made my point there. I want to also personalize this. Oh no. Now I remember. He wanted to make all these excuses after, but right after he knocked out my trainer in the amateurs, Auggie Sanchez, Kid Vegas, knocked him out in a 4-round war that I want to sink my teeth into just a little bit because I know we're taking up a lot of time asking a lot of the audience. But he said in the post-fight interview with Larry Merchant goes, now Naz, everyone is looking at these fights with Barrera and Morales as the fights that are really going to define you. And Hamed, mid-sentence, is nodding with him in full agreement. And he goes, absolutely, we're ready to fight these guys whenever they want in his really cool accent. Barrera, Morales, and they're gonna get knocked out too, Larry, and all that. And they're gonna get knocked out too. They could get it too. I've been wanting to fight these guys. So, at 2001, Barrera and Morales, it goes down. It did go down. But you can't agree with Larry in the heat of the moment after a sensational knockout of Auggie in an underrated 4-round war that really isn't that far off from the Kevin Kelly fight, his most famous 4-round war with an American. The Auggie fight is slept on. Trust me, you guys can go back and watch it. Yeah, but he agreed in the moment. So if you agreed in the moment and thereafter it's this, that, and the third, and it doesn't. No. And now I got to talk about the Sanchez fight a little bit. So my trainer, Auggie Sanchez, shout out to Auggie. I love Auggie. Auggie is now he worked with the Team USA team. So he worked with the Shakur Stevensons en route to winning a silver medal. You could ask Shakur about Auggie, and he'll give Auggie a lot of respect. Auggie beat Diego Corrales in the amateurs. Auggie, if you don't count Floyd, by most accounts, kind of getting jobbed in the bronze medal, in the medal fight where he had to settle for a bronze in the 96 Olympics. Auggie was the last guy, and Emmanuel Stewart, who trained Prince Naseem Hamed, brought this up in the Mayweather-Cotto fight. You can go to Floyd's post-fight in the Cotto fight when he goes ringside with Lampley and Emmanuel goes toughest fight since Auggie Sanchez, and Auggie was the last guy to legit beat Floyd in the amateurs, right? So shout out to Auggie. They fought 4 times, and they were LaMotta Robinson, and Auggie was LaMotta. He got one of them on Floyd. So he fights Prince Naseem, and so Prince Naseem was actually a villain in our gym because he knocked out our trainer, right? And that was Auggie's claim to fame on the major level, was fighting Prince Naseem. And Auggie dropped Prince Naseem twice to where Barry McGuigan on the British call, and a lot of people feel these British calls are biased to the Brit. He was going, this is disgraceful. Sanchez has knocked him down, and they didn't call it. To be fair to Prince Naseem, he hit Auggie with a number of hard shots, and Auggie would go to a clinch and would go to a knee, which could also be ruled a knockdown as well. But his 2 knockdowns were clean. He dropped him on a right hand, and then he hit him with a left hook later in the second round and made Prince Naseem gloves hit the canvas, which should be a knockdown. It was a 4-round shootout, and ultimately Auggie was getting hit with punches he couldn't see coming, Raheem, which was the Prince's signature. And the Prince knocked him out as an orthodox fighter when he got a lot of knockouts as a southpaw. So he was the better man on the night. But I think that fight, and I recommend everyone watching us go watch it, because I think that fight encapsulated who the Prince was. He was a dynamic, exciting, tough, because he got dropped, he got hit with clean shots and finished the job, knocked Auggie out. He was a superlative talent, spectacular puncher, dynamic, unorthodox. And then after the fight, kind of uncouth and classless. Auggie got escorted on a stretcher and would only go on to fight a few more times in his career till the Nevada State Athletic Commission in his early 20s said, we can't let you fight anymore, Augie, because of the punishment you've taken in fights like you have against Hamed. Now, he would go on to say to Larry in the post fight, I hope that kid, I hope Allah blesses him with the health. I hope God blesses him with the health to go home safe. But he never, Mike Tyson, one of the things people love about him is after he would knock a motherfucker out, would go over to him and help him up. It's standard fare from the Crawfords to the Canelos to every fighter goes over to the vanquished foe and shows us a sign of compassion, a sign of empathy, or as I like to put it, is the first one to put them back on the road to their self-respect and honor. Because if I'm the one who did it to you and I give you your props as a man and as a fighter, then right away, that's the first step to kind of recovery to the damage of being knocked out in front of the world, in front of thousands or millions of people. He didn't check on Auggie as he got carried out on a stretcher. And that was Prince Naseem all in one night. And by the way, Barrera later told Auggie, I learned a lot from that fight. That was Augie's dream fight, was Barrera. Barrera, who was the same kind of 5'5" height and build of Auggie, told him, your fight is what let me know I will beat him. I saw what I needed to see in that fight in particular. But that fight kind of summed up Hamed how he was. He could be classless, he could be uncouth, but damn was he exciting. Damn could he punch. Damn was he a unique talent. And damn was he not entertaining in and out on the mic and in the ring.
I really hope they stuck with that whole story because you really just got treated to a post-fight wrap-up discussion on Ahmed versus Auggie. You don't get that anywhere else but right here with Sean Zattel. I mean, framing that up for you, the audience, is a beautiful gift. That is something that, we pulled from the crates and every note has been checked. 100%. This is what the boxing community, just in case you don't know why this boxing world is such a community and really a small community, even as global and expansive as it is, those of us who live it and breathe it really are a very small number of people. But that kind of passion, that kind of recall, that kind of analysis of a fight that old just come out of you because you're in a gym with the guy who was in the fight, who was part of your boxing journey. All of these things are connected. And that is why I believe that the trainer who gets the worst deal in boxing in this day and age needs some protection. What they are to these young fighters is often a father figure. But what it is in business is a marriage. We respect the institution of marriage. And when people come together and earn funds together and help build each other's not only personal relationship because it's a marriage, but also fiscal foundation, and they can grow into success and earn income. When that partnership splits, when that union is broken, that marriage, one owes the other some financial support based on the support that was given when the union was together and the foundation was built. Nothing is more true of a relationship like that than the trainer-boxer relationship. When this fighter makes this money and decides to move on, or that union is split for whatever reason, if a certain amount of investment is made in time and effort and oftentimes finance on the trainer's side for a prospect, there should be some kind of legislation or union or in a contractual obligation that if the trainer can make the case for his investment up until that point, that there is some alimony given to the trainer who's made this investment and deserves some cut of future revenue, that deserves some return on investment, whether or not you're still at the helm. I believe that there are ways to do this and legislate this and have to prove that you indeed did make this investment and deserve this kind of money. But that is something that trainers just have to be completely dependent on the loyalty and the character and the appreciation of the fighter they train. And once big money starts to enter the equation and you've grown through your formative years and you're your own man and you have your own nuclear family and your own romantic marriage, sometimes the relationship with this trainer who guided you through in your mind becomes a lot less important. and you feel like you have other obligations and other people who deserve a bigger cut to this money, and you want some for yourself, there's not a lot left over for the trainer you're leaving. And is that fair to the trainer who's put that investment in? I don't think it is. I don't have the blueprint exactly of how you would structure a deal like this, but I think it's possible. I mean, we have child actors, we have all kind of young people who earn money, and granted, there are some horror stories out there, but Hollywood has figured out how a manager can uh, reciprocate, receive their right money from young talent in a way that parents can not rob their kids, but also, have a certain amount of money allocated to them while they're taking care of their kid who's making money in the show business. There is a way for a fighter to enter a gym, enter an obligation to a trainer who invests in him early. And if he pays off late and decides to leave that trainer, that there is something the trainer is owed. So there's some job security, some financial security for a trainer who makes this investment. And I believe the lack of that security is what makes for these somewhat treacherous relationships down the line. If we look at Triple G and Abel Sanchez, that is one of the glaring kind of debates. Uh, yes, Abel Sanchez made a lot of money with Triple G, but when that big, super big contract came, which nobody, I think, believes Triple G gets to without Abel Sanchez, Triple G's like, this is my last super big payday. I've given you enough money. Now, this last fight or two or three, I'm going to just leave you. I've learned everything. I've gotten to this point. This is the biggest payday by far. This is bigger than four of my last paydays combined. And I'm going to take the money and start my own family and move to my own country and do my own shit. And you're out the door. And Sanchez has no argument. That's not right. I'm not saying you have to be forced to stay with a trainer or give him 25% after you've left him, but something. And something that should be out of your hands. So it's not down to your character or your loyalty or what you believe is right in the moment or based on the relationship you currently have. That is what is owed to trainers in this business, and it is the glaring omission from these stories when it comes down to who deserves what at the end. The trainer has the least leverage and ground on which to stand to make his case, and no legislation to protect him. Let's get there.
Yeah, I mean, not only was he your trainer, he was your Vince McMahon, bro. He gave you your Stone Cold Steve Austin Mexican style gimmick. Like you were just Gennady before him. Like the reason you got Mexicans for Triple G and all that was your Mexican trainer was like Mexican style and solidified that. And yeah, he gave you your people's eyebrow, bro. But anyway, ironically, I'll close with this. Ironically, to your point, this wasn't one I originally intended on making until you made the point you made. Auggie, who now has a world champion from Japan, has helped train part of the Uzbek national team, has been all over the world and had to get it from the damn mud. He had a fighter that I remember I told you on the undercard of Pacquiao Vargas, Jesse Magdaleno, who would go on to upset Nonito Donaire. Now, Jesse was the most, along with Michael Hunter, was the most talented fighter in our gym when I stepped through the Barry's boxing gym. And we all knew Jesse was going to become a world champion at 14. Why? Because speaking of Barrera, how he ties into this, Barrera was getting ready for his rematch with Rocky Juarez in Vegas at the MGM. Jesse, at 14, 15 years old, 14, went down to Texas to help Juarez prepare for Barrera. And apparently kind of beat his ass, like did really well with this grown man about to fight on HBO pay-per-view against one of the pound-for-pound stars. And I couldn't get over it. I go, he did? Yes, Jesse did his thing against Juarez. And I go, okay, well, he's going to be a world champion. And when we were going to the Thomas and Mack that night, you were almost tempted to lay a bet because I told you with complete conviction he is going to beat Nonito Donaire. And he did. Now, guess who wasn't in his corner by that time? Auggie Sanchez was not in his corner by that time. So there you go. Auggie, who helped take him with Pat Barry, Down to Texas, and shout out to Jesse. I'm very happy. I got mad love for Jesse. I looked up to him in the gym. I'm happy he became world champion. It's not a shade to Jesse. It's to highlight your point that you're making. By the time Jesse was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting in world titles in Thomas and Mack on Pacquiao cards, Augie wasn't there anymore. He missed that boat. And so there you go.
And Brendan Ingle is not here anymore to make his case. And he secured his boat and put a bag on it.